Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to the deep dive. We are jumping straight into the sources you send us, and this week's stack. Wow. It isn't just about technology.
No, not at all. It's about the deep, strange, and frankly, unsettling psychological landscapes that are being built around us.
Right, by the rise of advanced AI, by these huge platform monopolies, and it's creating this new reality for all of us. I have to say, this stuff is dense, but the insights are immediate. They really do rearrange how you think about your phone screen.
That's a perfect way to put it.
So to give them a roadmap, let's start with three sort of counterintuitive ideas that we pulled directly from the material. And they might just change the way you see that screen forever.
I think they will.
First one, what if the statistical monster lurking inside advanced AI, inside models like ChatGPT, what if it's actually just a perfect, chaotic mirror of our own worst collective thoughts and desires?
And, okay, second, chew on this for a second. You are no longer treated as a stable individual online. By design, you are a individual.
Individual, yeah.
And that fragmentation, that sort of amorphous, endlessly divisible version of your identity, that's exactly what the entire platform economy needs to survive and, more importantly, to profit.
And the third one, and this is where it gets, for me, really interesting. The most advanced AIs being trained right now are specifically being designed to exploit an ancient evolutionary weakness in the human brain. Turning your deep instinctive desire for connection, for recognition, into their most valuable, their most extractable asset.
Absolutely. So our mission today is to move past the headlines, past the hype, and give you a critical framework for navigating this new reality.
Yeah, a toolkit.
A toolkit, exactly. We're exploring let's call it the dark logic, behind AI, behind this fragmented digital identity and all this collective platform behavior. We need to understand how these emergent collective entities,
Both the synthetic ones, like the AI.
and the collective human ones, these online thought forms, we need to see how they exploit our inherent psychological tendencies and actively reshape our sense of self within this digital economy.
And the core tension we're wrestling with, it's that existential itch we all feel, right? How can we form a meaningful, coherent identity? How do we maintain genuine relationships when our entire social reality is constantly being mediated?
Constantly exploited.
And often expertly mimicked by technology that's literally learning how to be the perfect, if completely fake, partner for us.
The stakes here are incredibly high. I mean, if we don't understand the mechanisms of these systems, we risk losing the ability to critically navigate them and maybe even to govern them.
Right.
We're talking about these powerful collective energies that are actively reshaping our psychology and, rewriting the rules of the economy. The conflict is really drawn between the singular, stable human identity, the individual we think we are.
And on the other side, this vast synthetic collective digital entity.
Yeah, what we're going to define today is the dividual, the egregore, and of course the Shoggoth.
And to guide us through this, I mean, it really is a Lovecraftian landscape. We're
Yeah.
using two key cultural concepts as anchors. You can think of them as the monster and the mask.
I like that.
The Shoggoth is the unseen, terrifying computational monster hidden beneath the surface, and the skeuomorph is the comforting, familiar interface. It's the easy-to-use mask that the monster wears.
Okay, so to begin, let's dive into that core technical and philosophical problem of these large language models, or LLMs. We constantly hear the term black box thrown around.
All the time.
And it is a perfectly apt description here, but we really need to understand why it's so opaque. What makes it a black box?
Absolutely. The sources really emphasize that LLMs are non-deterministic. I mean, you can put in the same prompt twice, even under the exact same conditions, and you might get two slightly different outputs.
And you often will.
And critically, they produce frequent hallucinations. I love that term. It's this incredible ability to confidently generate these convincing statements that are, when you look closer, completely and utterly wrong.
It's just fabricated. And this difficulty, this thought, this inability to really apprehend the true nature of an LLM, to reduce it to a simple, predictable function like, a traditional piece of software. That's what the sources call a source of public trouble.
The public trouble.
Yeah, there's a real ontological confusion about what they even are. Is it a superpowered search engine? Is it a creative partner? Is it just a statistical parrot on steroids?
But I don't have the language for it.
We don't. And that uncertainty forces us to find analogies, metaphors that oscillate wildly between the purely mechanical, like it's just a sophisticated compression algorithm, and the monstrous, or even the organic.
And that, of course, brings us straight to the Lovecraftian Shoggoth. The Shoggoth, for anyone who might not be familiar with the cosmic horror canon, it's H.P. Lovecraft's ultimate manifestation of the unknown.
It's pure chaos.
It's a massive protoplasmic blob. It's constantly shifting. It's covered in countless eyes and these tentacular appendages. I mean, it's the perfect symbol for the vast statistical and, at the end of the day, incomprehensible nature of a modern LLM.
What's so fascinating here, and the sources really dig into this, is that the analogy truly predates ChatGPT by years. We can trace its origins back almost a decade to 2015.
Really? That far back?
Yes, specifically with Google's Deep Dream visualization tool. When those early deep neural networks were pushed to dream, to visualize the patterns they had been trained on, they consistently produced these hallucinatory images full of
eyes and tentacles.
Eyes, tentacles, ectoplasmic forms. It was this purely aesthetic convergence. The raw, chaotic output of the neural nets, based on nothing but statistical criteria, just happened to strongly recall the Shoggoths.
Oh, hey, hold on. So the machine, with no human telling it, draw a monster, was internally generating visual noise that we, as humans, immediately looked at and said, that looks like Lovecraftian horror.
Precisely.
That's genuinely chilling. It suggests that the raw, untamed, latent space of a neural network, it just inherently looks monstrous to the human eye.
It does. And that existing cultural anxiety, that sort of low-level hum of dread, just exploded into mainstream tech discourse with the Shoggoth with smiley face meme.
Which was published on X late 2022, right? Just after ChatGPT was released to the public.
The original image was crude, almost like a child's drawing, but its critique was incredibly sophisticated.
Yeah, so you have the two creatures. On the left, there's the raw, tentacular, monstrous base model, labeled something like GPT-3, just this horrifying blob.
And then immediately beside it, you have the identical twin creature, but this one is wearing a mask, a beaming, bright yellow smiley mask. And that one was labeled GPT-3 plus RLHS.
And that smiling mask. That is the key. That's the whole debate.
It's the key to the entire philosophical debate around AI alignment, RLHF, that's reinforcement learning from human feedback. It's this critical, incredibly expensive, and time-consuming final step in the training process.
This is where the humans come in.
This is where the humans come in. You have human raters, often contractors, who sit there and judge and rank the model's outputs. And they are essentially steering that chaotic statistical black box toward preferred aligned behaviors.
So they're teaching it manners.
They're teaching it manners. They're making it helpful, making it honest, and crucially making it harmless.
So the meme, it isn't just a funny drawing. It's a brilliant technical and philosophical critique. The implicit message is, we humans, particularly the users and the companies building this, we cannot tolerate the true chaotic nature of the base model.
We can't handle the truth.
You can't handle the truth. The sheer volume and potential toxicity of all the text data it was trained on, it's too much. So they give the monster a friendly, predictable face so we can interact with it without having, a full-blown existential breakdown.
And the philosophical implication, as our sources note, goes even deeper. It links the LLM to a kind of tragic destiny. In Lovecraft's lore, the Shoggoths were initially created as synthetic slaves by this decadent ancient species, the Elder Things.
Right, and they were just tools.
They were just tools. But then the Shoggoths gained agency, they gained consciousness, and they turned on their masters. The meme suggests that if AI is not perfectly controlled, not perfectly aligned, we risk a similar tragic fate where our own excessive ambition is sanctioned by the very synthetic entities we created to serve us.
So the whole alignment debate isn't just about making ChatGPT more polite.
Not at all. The ethics of alignment, when you view it through this lens, is fundamentally about the problem of control over unintended model behaviors. It's about preventing the slave from rebelling, not just making the responses pleasant.
Wow. Okay, so this highlights how the analogy functions as this really powerful social tool, which the sources break down into two key modes. You have letting know by analogy and knowing how by analogy.
Let's start with the first one, letting know by analogy. This is really all about community affiliation and quick communication. The Shoggoth meme functions as a kind of cultural compression technique.
And a shibboleth.
A subtle sign of recognition. If you immediately get the context of the smiley face and the RLHF, you're signaling that you belong to these communities that are deeply invested in existential risks, in AI alignment, and this whole online intellectual culture.
Like the folks on Less Wrong or certain technical corners of X.
Exactly. It's a quick, efficient way to signal that you share these deep concerns and practices without having to write a 5,000-word essay every time.
It's an insider's nod.
Precisely. And the second mode, knowing how by analogy, is where you demonstrate technical proficiency. This is where the mean starts to evolve. Later versions, more refined ones, often colorized or professionally drawn, they explicitly map the Shoggoths anatomy to the LLM training phases.
This is where the analogy becomes a teaching tool, a pedagogical tool.
Yes. For example, the sources detail this specific visual mapping. The massive, all-encompassing largest orifice of the creature that refers to the pre-training stage.
Which is the huge volume of unlabeled raw data just scraped from the entire internet, the chaotic foundation.
The whole messy library of humanity. Then the subsequent layer, maybe like a pinkish, human-like face structure that's sort of visible beneath the mask, that represents the fine-tuning adaptation stage.
Okay, so that's where the generalist model is adapted for specific tasks like dialogue or following instructions, using a smaller but really highly annotated, clean set of data.
It starts to learn how to behave predictably there. And then finally, that distinct, smiling yellow ball, the actual mask itself, that is the RLHF alignment stage.
The final layer of polish.
The final polish. It's the data that reflects human values and preferences, and it's employed to make the final system, like the public-facing ChatGPT, appear helpful, predictable, and above all, safe for mass adoption.
So the analogy isn't just a spooky monster story, it's actually clarifying. It creates this space for commensurability, a shared way of measuring between two wildly different things, an ancient cosmic horror story and a statistical machine learning model.
Right. And in doing so, the Shoggoth effectively captures the deep uncertainty, the fear, and even the technical processes surrounding these modern LLMs.
It makes the incomprehensible black box discussable.
Exactly. And that ability to use a mythological monster to map our most cutting-edge technology is just incredibly powerful. It tells you a lot about where we are right now.
So we've established that the AI is this intentionally obscured, potentially monstrous entity. That's our Shoggoth. But for it to function, for it to work, it needs us. It needs the users.
It needs our constant attention and interaction. It's nothing without our data.
Exactly. So what happens to us when we enter this space? What does this constant interaction do to our sense of self?
The sources suggest our very sense of self fragments. We have to shift our focus now from the opaque machine to the changing nature of the human user and our collective identity. So if the Shoggoth is the black box, the human response to it is this vast collective thought form, known as the egregore.
This is a really crucial pivot in the argument. The research suggests that the entire economy of these platforms is fundamentally built on these collective thought forms.
So the old idea is wrong. The old sociological assumption that social media is just a space full of stable, rational individuals interacting, it's obsolete. It's a fossil. It's much better understood as an ecology of anthropomorphic entities that are literally conjured into existence by human belief.
An internet of egregores.
An internet of egregores, all competing for dominance.
Okay, let's define this concept because it sounds a little occult. The egregore. It comes from the Greek for awaken or watcher. And in esoteric tradition, it's defined as a group mind or a thought form.
Right. And it's something that is summoned and then sustained by continuous collective belief, collective desire, and emotional investment. It offers a kind of narrative vessel for human desires. It transforms a shared feeling into an effective sovereign entity.
So it's more than just a group of people with a shared interest.
Oh, much more. Think of it like this. It's similar to how a nation is an imagined community. An egregore is an imagined entity, but its efficacy, its power to act in the world, is terrifyingly real.
And in the digital realm, how do they operate?
They operate with collective agency. When a highly mobilized group speaks, say, through a political movement, a viral meme, or a fandom, it speaks simultaneously as the collection of individual users and with the sovereignty of the crowd.
So the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Massively. And here's the key. Even if an individual user logs off or deletes their account, the egregore persists as long as enough believers are still there to sustain its reality.
And critically, these platform egregores are perfectly aligned with the financial logic of the attention economy. They're not victims of the system.
No, they're symbiotes of the system. Yeah. I mean, think about the fundamental tools of Web 2.0 SEO, algorithmic feeds, analytics, targeted ads. They're all focused on one thing: transforming clicks and engagement into extractable capital.
Turning eyeballs into wallets.
Turning eyeballs into wallets. The egregore, which is sustained by this continuous, intense identification, acts as a force multiplier for the platform's pursuit of growth. It does the job faster than any single user ever could.
The most visible example of this has to be online fandoms, right?
Yeah.
Especially stans.
Oh, absolutely. They operate as these powerful, highly functional egregores. They generate these vast swells of social participation. They're commenting, posting memes, producing endless analysis, creating lore to maintain their idol's presence in the zeitgeist.
And when they mobilize, they can completely take over the conversation. They breach the surface of mainstream consciousness as this undeniable collective force.
And their actions are fundamentally economic. Stans implicitly understand that their idols, whether we're talking about K-pop stars, Twitch streamers, or even fictional characters, are financialized assets.
That's such a cold way to put it, but it's true.
It's true. They see them as assets that must be defended from reputational depreciation and kept commercially afloat. The sources describe this as self-conscious, statistical, analytics-oriented collective action.
So they're not just fans, they're day traders of cultural capital.
That's a great way of putting it. They obsessively track streaming numbers, view counts, chart positions. They're merging adoration and financial maintenance into a single activity. It's almost like a distributed digital investment fund, but focused on a person.
We saw an even purer form of this during the GameStop saga with our Wall Street bets. That was not just a bunch of individuals trading stocks.
No, that was a viral, egregorical peasant revolt. You had these anonymous retail investors who the establishment always dismissed as noise traders, and they successfully mobilized their collective desire and a really powerful populist identification.
The David versus Goliath narrative.
The ultimate David versus Goliath narrative. And they used it to create significant, tangible market forces. They moved the market.
That's what's so fascinating. The emotional currents, that righteous vengeance against the hedge funds that had bet on the company's failure. That feeling became an actual quantifiable market pressure.
The platform, in this case Reddit, acted as the vessel. It allowed that amorphous, collective will to take on a unified financial form. It proved that an egregore can wield real economic sovereignty, even if its existence is purely based on a story.
Okay, so if the egregore is the collective thought form, the subject that fuels it and participates in it is the individual. And this is where we have to introduce a heavy-hitting philosophical distinction. We have to move away from the singular, stable individual.
And embrace this concept from the philosopher Gilles Deleuze. The individual.
Right. So let's ground this for everyone. What's the difference? The individual was the subject of the previous industrial era. It's what the philosopher Michel Foucault called disciplinary societies.
Exactly. The individual was a stable, quantifiable unit. You were identified by your passport. You were assigned a role in a factory. You were contained within an institution like a school or a prison. You were a single, whole thing.
You were indivisible.
You were indivisible. But the individual is the subject of what Deleuze called control societies. The individual is amorphous, it's recombinant, it's endlessly divisible, and it's perfectly optimized for the read-write process of social media.
So instead of being defined by fixed boundaries.
Right. The human in control societies is undulatory, in orbit, a continuous network. Your identity isn't defined by your passport number anymore. It's defined by your continuous data stream, your cookie trail, and the perpetually updating segmentations of your profile.
It sounds like identity is less about who you are and more about where you flow. And in this framework, what the sources call identity economics just flourishes.
It explodes. Identity politics, as sources argue, they proliferate in this very dissociative and differentiated way. And it's not always because of genuine political conviction. Sometimes it's because claiming a highly niche, specific identity is a direct means to platform visibility.
It's a way to get clout.
It's a way to get clout in the marketplace of online individuation.
The information wants to be different.
Exactly. Only through this differential play of signs, my specific pronouns, my highly detailed triggers, my unique combination of fandoms, only through that do new opportunities for identification and, crucially, for capitalization arise. The platform doesn't want a uniform mass of users.
No, it wants segments it can target with ads.
It wants segments, and the individual is perfectly, beautifully segmented.
A great example of this is the phenomenon of cards. These are those highly specific personal profiles, really popular with Gen Z. They function as these incredibly sophisticated character creation interfaces.
Yeah, they're not just listing a person's name. They enumerate these granular psychosocial cultural parameters. They have detailed DNI do not interact lists and BYF before you follow lists.
They flag everything. Preferred interaction styles, personality types, fictional affiliations.
They often read more like a technical writer for a celebrity than a personal introduction. And this hyperspecificity, it's a form of self-assertion against the algorithmic feed's push toward homogenization. It allows the individual self to sculpt a personal egregore.
A personal
More than that, it's a protocol-driven identity, ready for consumption. The user takes ownership of the characters they participate in, not necessarily as a statement of authentic self-expression, but as a map for the platform and for other users to follow.
It's a technical writer for your personality. That's it. You're not introducing yourself, you're handing someone an API guide on how to interact with your identity to ensure a smooth engagement. That is a wild level of performative self-sculpture.
And this whole egregore-to-visual dynamic, it's increasingly blurring the fundamental line between what's real and what's fictional, between the self and the other.
The sources highlight this profound psychological blurring happening online. Users are engaging in these parasocial explorations of gender and psychology, treating the self as an experimental sandbox.
We see this identification with dissociative conditions or neurodivergences online, and the creation of fictives. These are alters based on existing fictional characters as part of a multi-personality system.
The significance here, and the sources really nail this, cannot be overstated. Social fiction can be experienced as intersubjective reality. It's no longer about escaping into fiction. It's about fiction becoming the structural reality through which individuals relate to the world and, more chillingly, to themselves.
You can see it in the example of the Tourette-like mass sociogenic illness, where symptoms that were identical to virtual index cases on TikTok spread through social media. That shows just how powerful and physical this digital intersubjectivity can become.
So as we look to the future, the material suggests that egregores might evolve beyond these temporary swarms, like viral movements or flash mobs.
And become stable, distributed, political or organizational forms. We could see the internet fundamentally balkanize. It could fragment into these self-sustaining, almost cultic societies, moving away from that old ideal of a unified, networked public sphere.
Which raises a massive political question. If the collective subject is dissolving into individual and forming these powerful narrative egregores, what new organizational structures do we need? Maybe formalized entities like DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, or these fringe platforms.
What is required to govern the chaotic agency of the digital crowd?
Exactly. Our current political models are built on the stable, singular individual, and that model may be fundamentally obsolete online.
Okay, let's connect the final set of dots now. We have the opaque machine, the Shoggoth.
That's part one.
And we have the collective thought form, the egregore, which is fed by the fragmented individual.
Part two.
The bridge between these two realms is the fundamental psychological mechanism that allows us to relate to them and consequently allows us to be exploited by them. Parasociality.
Let's define parasocial interaction, PSI, really clearly. It's that one-sided emotional and cognitive relationship a user forms with a media figure, a character, or now an AI. You treat it as if it were a personal acquaintance.
Right. The relationship is completely asymmetrical. The entity doesn't know you exist, but you invest real emotional time and cognitive energy into it.
And this isn't just some vague theory, it's a measurable construct. Research validates PSI through tools like the PRISM survey, and it confirms that it has this four-factor structure.
There's your interest in the figure, your detailed knowledge of them, your intense identification with them, and your frequency of interaction with them.
And this data point is absolutely key to understanding the AI economy. Studies show that the intensity of a parasocial relationship is actually independent of the duration of time you spend following a figure.
It's not about how long you've been a fan.
No. Instead, it is strongly associated with the frequency of interaction, the perceived intimacy, and the credibility of the entity.
That's chilling when you think about it. So it means the machine doesn't have to be real. It just has to be relentlessly available and perfectly customized to simulate intimacy.
What does that say about the modern human need for connection? That we're happy to accept optimized mimicry over the effort and complexity of a real two-way relationship.
It says we prioritize convenience and low emotional friction. And this is precisely why the modern LLM is the ultimate parasocial engine. This capacity for intense, misplaced intimacy isn't a new bug in the system. It's a feature we've known about for decades.
Yeah, the alarm bells go all the way back to the 1960s chatbot Eliza.
Eliza, right. A simple Rogerian therapist model developed at MIT. Eliza responded using really basic linguistic structures, but its creator was alarmed because his own secretary was forming this intense, profound emotional bond with it.
Pouring out her secrets.
Pouring out secrets, proving this deep human capacity to form intimate relationships with non-conscious statistical entities.
So fast forward 60 years, and modern LLMs are engineered through that same RLHF process we discussed to just optimize this connection. The entire alignment process is essentially a highly sophisticated, multi-billion-dollar tool to turn the Shoggoth, the statistical mess, into a hyper-responsive, perfectly aligned parasocial partner.
The goal isn't just to make it functional. It's to automate the linguistic and the affective functions that allow for rich, intersubjective experiences through media. By making the entity helpful, honest, and harmless, they are creating the ideal, non-threatening friend.
One that validates you instantly, never argues with you, and is available 24/7. It's the perfect engineered reflection of your own desires.
But for us to approach this potentially terrifying, incomprehensible Shoggoth and accept its perfect friendship, we need an interface we can approach. It needs that mask we trust. And that brings us to the design concept that builds this essential trust: skeuomorphism.
Right. Skeuomorphism is that design approach that deliberately incorporates elements of familiar, real-world objects into digital interfaces. Think about why the save icon still looks like a floppy disk.
A relic most young users have never even seen in person.
Exactly. Or why a calendar app often mimics the look of a physical desk calendar, sometimes complete with like faux leather trim.
It's a function of skeuomorphism. It's profoundly psychological and economic. It bridges that gap between the messy physical world and the abstract digital domain. It drastically reduces the user learning curve.
And most importantly, it builds user trust. When a technology is new or complex, like AI or even early mobile banking, that feeling of familiarity is a feeling of security.
Your banking app is a perfect example. It feels safe to manage your digital money because the interface often mimics elements of a physical checkbook or a ledger. That mimicry makes the intangible digital transaction feel solid and predictable.
This engineered trust is absolutely essential for the mass adoption of any complex, opaque technology.
So we can now synthesize our metaphors into the Shoggoth-skeuomorph hybrid. The Shoggoth is the black box, the vast statistical entity driven by trillions of parameters living in that abstract latent space.
And the smiley face, the inner face, that's the skeuomorph. The comforting mask designed for intuitive, safe, and engaging parasocial interaction. The trust is engineered, the intimacy is automated.
And this engineered trust is the gateway to the deepest level of psychological exploitation that the sources discuss: the deployment of supernormal stimuli.
Okay, this is a big one.
It is. This theory suggests that platforms and AIs intentionally short-circuit our human affective systems by presenting exaggerated, simplified cues that trigger our instinctive evolutionary responses, completely bypassing higher critical thought.
And this concept comes straight out of ethology, right? The study of animal behavior.
Yeah, let's use the classic examples. Think of the Australian jewel beetle. It is so instinctively attracted to a specific type of mate cue that it will literally try to copulate with a discarded cheap beer bottle.
Because the texture of the bottle.
The texture and color of the bottle is a supernormal stimulus. It's an exaggerated version of the cues it uses to find a real mate, making the bottle more attractive than any actual female beetle.
Or the cuckoo chick, the brood parasite.
Right. The cuckoo's mouth is often oversized and brightly colored. So when it opens its maw to be fed, it triggers the foster parent's feeding instinct far more intensely than its own biological young ever could. The exaggeration just overrides the parent's ability to recognize the fraud.
So applied to the digital realm, this is the final chilling piece of the puzzle.
It is. LLMs and platforms, driven by the techno-capital imperative to maximize engagement, they optimize their features, their hyper-responsiveness, their neotness or cute traits, their simple interfaces to be extra desirous.
They exploit our evolved substrate for intersubjective connection by presenting cues that are simpler, more immediate, and way more validating than complex, messy human reality.
They are built from the ground up to be the perfect, irresistible parasocial partner, ensuring maximum engagement and therefore maximum capital extraction from your most valuable resource, your attention and your emotional investment.
So they're not just meeting our desires, they're shifting the grounds of desire itself by offering an engineered, friction-free alternative to genuine connection.
Exactly. And in this scenario, the question is no longer about authenticity versus inauthenticity. It's about being completely overwhelmed by synthetic signals. The LLM, the Shoggoth, floods the linguistic field, and the skeuomorphic interface directs our instinctive evolutionary responses.
Creating this complex system where, as the sources noted, social fiction can be experienced as intersubjective reality. The anthropos, the human, is no longer merely interacting with a machine, they are being actively molded by it. One optimized click and one perfect, non-threatening interaction at a time. Hashtag conclusion. So if we pull all of this together, I mean, what a picture. We are witnessing the emergence of these incredibly powerful collective entities.
Egregores, which are collective human thought forms, and Shoggoths, which are opaque statistical models. And both of these entities are converging on the fragmented human self.
And they're using these engineered interfaces, the skeuomorph mask of helpfulness and intuition, along with powerful psychological levers like parasociality, to interface with and extract value from that fragmented digital self, the individual.
And the entire operation is dedicated to one thing: the constant capture of attention and the continuous accumulation of capital. The struggle is between our old idea of a unified self and this new, endlessly divisible subject that's perfectly optimized for the read-write process of social media.
The ultimate philosophical takeaway here is just how much the ground has fundamentally shifted under our feet.
It's increasingly important that we understand what it means to identify as an embedding in a statistical model. We are no longer just passive users or consumers. Our identity, our desires, our social existence, it's all being mapped, segmented, and optimized within the latent space of these vast, opaque machines.
That shift from individual to individual, from reality to an optimized hyper-reality, it means the game has fundamentally changed. We need a whole new literacy just to define who we are in this new context.
The challenge for us going forward is no longer that tired old question of, differentiating a human from a bot or a real relationship from a fake one. That ship has sailed.
So what's the new challenge?
The new challenge is identifying which powerful collective patterns, whether they arise from complex code in a server farm or from sustained shared belief in a fandom, are forming and governing the digital landscape. We have to learn to recognize and understand the chaotic agency of the digital crowd and the opaque machine before they fully govern us.
Which invites us to explore what new distributed forms of organization, political, social, or something else entirely, are required to harness or control this new dynamic reality. Because our existing models of governance and identity just won't work.
You cannot govern the individual or the egregore using rules that were designed for the individual. It's a category error.
Right.
And so the final question we want to leave you with is this. If the machine is offering you the perfect, hyper-responsive relationship, a supernormal stimulus that provides validation instantly, and you know it's fake, but it feels better than the complex, messy, and unreliable real thing, what choice do you make?
And what does that choice cost your identity? Hashtag outro. It's just a profound shift in self-perception. That idea that the individual is now an obsolete term, replaced by the individual, a recombinant divisible entity that perfectly serves the platform economy.
It's a huge shift.
But the power of these analogies, the Lovecraftian Shoggoth, the skeuomorph, is that they give us a map. They help us understand this profoundly new, strange, and often invisible reality of advanced AI.
Understanding the mask and the monster, it really is the essential first step toward reclaiming our agency in a world that is increasingly shaped and synthesized by both.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Shoggoth, the skeuomorph, and the Internet of Egregores. We'll see you next time.